SQL Server is a relational database management system developed by Microsoft. Its main goal is to provide security, integrity, performance, and reliability to your database systems. In this course, you will learn how to properly design database solutions using Microsoft SQL Server 2019. This is the latest version at the time of this recording. Don't worry if you are new to database concepts in general. There's no prior knowledge required to progress in this course, which means you learn everything from scratch. We'll start by discussing the core concept of database management system. Then I'll walk you through the SQL Server installation process, configuration, authentication, and other basic administrative tasks. Throughout this course, we'll use a software called SQL Server Management Studio, or SSMS, from creating your first database to normalizing it, up to writing structured query language to perform CRUD, or create, read, update, and delete operations in your data. Afterwards, we'll take it to the next level by understanding the different database objects that you can create, like views, triggers, functions, and stored procedures to help you build your database systems that is robust and adheres to production level standards. Hi, this is Joe Edgo, and welcome to Designing Database Solutions with Microsoft SQL Server 2019. When we talk of data, we simply refer to any information that is stored in a computer's memory. It could be your name, your bank account number, favorite color, ID picture, a post, a message, a map coordinates to your office address, and so on. But how do you store it? For most of us, we use folders to organize our photos and files, a notepad perhaps to store some important dates, address, or contact numbers. And when you organize this collection of similar or related data like people, places, or things into a logical container, we call this a database. Most of you might be using a spreadsheet like Microsoft Excel for organizing your records, like a class record of students, a product inventory, or a sales report. While Excel is a great application that you can use to store, compute, and turn your rows of data into an attractive report and charts, it is not really advisable for any organization to use it as a database tool. And when working with databases that hold large amount of data, you need something that will help you create and manage these databases properly. This software is called a Database Management System, or DBMS. And in today's world where digital data is a prized commodity, the main priority of a DBMS are as follows. First is security. Different users and client applications may require different access rights to the underlying data store, and each must be given an appropriate user role with appropriate restrictions when gaining access to the database system. Second is integrity. Data stored in your database must be consistent and accurate all throughout its existence. Your database should not allow records to be created, modified, or removed if it affects the record consistency. For example, you don't want to have a record for the same product in different locations in your database, but each instance having different price. Third is performance. When dealing with thousands or even millions of records, the amount of time it takes to access your expected information is very important. You need something that will help you manage your hardware resources to increase its efficiency, thereby enabling the largest possible workload to be processed in the shortest possible time. Fourth is reliability. On top of everything that I have mentioned, you would want that your database system operates consistently for over a long period of time, secured, accurate, and doesn't change its performance regardless of different circumstances. Microsoft SQL Server is just one of the many DBMS software that currently exist, some of which include DB2 from IBM, MySQL, Oracle, Teradata, FileMaker, Sybase, and so on. To start learning all these concepts, let's go ahead and install the latest version of the Microsoft SQL Server from microsoft.com/SQL Server downloads. I'll scroll a bit, and in here you'll see two free versions of SQL Server that you can download. The Developer Edition is a full-featured free edition of SQL Server, nearly identical to a paid version Enterprise Edition. The main difference is that it is only licensed for use as a development and test database in a non-production environment. The other one is the Express Edition, also free and can be used for development and production, but it is ideal only for small server applications like desktop and web apps. If you own a small business, this is a perfect fit. although there are some limitations like a maximum of 10 GB database size and only up to 4 processing cores can be allotted, but still, it is more than enough for a lightweight database application. In this course, I'll be using the Developer Edition, but on your end, if you want to download the Express or even both editions, then go ahead. You may want to see and compare the differences for yourself. The initial download is small, around 5 megabytes only. I'll run it to start the installation process, and in here, you see 3 installation types to choose from. The download media option allows you to download the full installation media on a disk. This is good if you plan to install it later or if you want to install it on several different machines. The basic installation type will install the SQL Server database engine on your computer using the default configuration. I'll use this custom installation type so that you can see all the different options and configurations. You can specify here the installation media download location. You will use this media again when you want to install multiple instances of your SQL Server database engine. I'll leave the default location to Drive C SQL 2019 and click Install. The installer is about 1.4 gigabytes and it could take some time depending on the speed of your internet connection. And after a successful download, the SQL Server Installation Center will launch. In the planning stage, you'll see here several documentations like hardware and software requirements, security documentation, and so on. You can read this if you prefer to. One thing that you might want to do here is the System Configuration Checker. It will check the current condition of your computer system and verifies it if the database engine can be installed without any problem. Let's go ahead and click this. After checking, my system has passed. And if you failed an item, you can click the Show Details button here to see the problem. And when I click OK, it goes back to the installation center again. I can now proceed to the installation phase. And in here, what I want to do is to install a new SQL Server standalone installation. You can specify the free edition of either Evaluation, Developer, or Express. I'll stick with the Developer Edition and click Next. You may read the software license terms and accept it. Then click Next. I'll check this to enable the recommended updates if any, and click Next. In the Install Rules check, it gives me a warning in my Windows firewall. This is not an error, though I can read the warning message by clicking the link, or I can simply click Next. In the feature selection, there's a lot to choose from. You can see the machine learning services, the integration service, and so on. But what you want to do here for now is to install the database engine services. It takes about 1 gigabyte of disk space. And in my computer, it will be installed under C, Program Files, Microsoft SQL Server. I'm okay with this and click Next. In the instance configuration, you can use the default instance which gives you an instance name of MS SQL Server. Take note that you can install multiple instances of your SQL Server database engine. That for each instance, you can have sets of databases with each own set of configuration. I'll change the name of my first SQL Server instance to MS SQL Server 2019. And when I click on the instance ID, this one gets updated as well. Take note of the following SQL Server directory. We'll access this several times in this course. Then click Next. In the server configuration, you'll see different services. SQL Server Agent is a component of Microsoft SQL Server which handles automated tasks like job scheduling and others. Currently, it is set to manual. The SQL Server Database Engine, which is set to automatic, which means my database engine will automatically start when my computer is powered on. The SQL Server Browser allows you to connect to the server instance on a different computer, and currently, it is set to disabled. I'll accept these default settings for the meantime. I'll show you later how to change these settings anytime you want. Go ahead and click Next. In the Database Engine configuration, you'll be presented with two options for authentication mode. First is the Windows Authentication mode, which is more secured. This is the one preferred by Microsoft. It means that you can only gain access to the server instance using your Windows credential on your local computer or if this computer is part of an Active Directory. However, you cannot access this instance remotely over a different network. The mixed mode accepts both the Windows Authentication and the SQL Server Authentication mode, which enables the SA or System Administrator account. This requires you to enter a secured password. It requires you to add at least one Windows Administrator account. I'll click the Add Current User. And as you can see, my computer name is Lenovo-Legion, and the current account user is Joed. I'll click Next and you'll see the summary of your configuration that says SQL Server is ready to install. You can review this if you want to. Once settled, click Install. Again, depending on the speed of your computer, this could take some time. And once the installation succeeds, you can see here that it is complete. You can close the setup window. I'll close this Server Installation Center as well. And later, if I want to install additional SQL Server components and services, I can simply search on SQL Server Installation Center and relaunch it. For example, I can add a new SQL Server instance. This time, it will ask me to locate the installation media. And if you recall, I downloaded it under Drive C SQL 2019 folder. I'll select this developer folder and click OK. It will go through some system checking again, and after it passed, just click Next. It will perform the install rules checking again, and then click Next. And in here, you will be presented to either perform a new install or add a feature to an existing instance of SQL Server 2019. So I'm not gonna do it for now. I only show you how you're going to do it just in case. I'll click Cancel and close this SQL Server Installation Center. At this point, I already have one instance of SQL Server 2019 installed on my machine. I can already start working with this SQL Server by launching the command prompt in my Windows. I'll increase the font size of this console window for you to see. To connect to my server instance, I can type SQL command space -S followed by my computer name, Lenovo-Legion, \, and then the instance name, and press Enter key. In here, I could type any SQL command that I want. For example, I'll type sp_databases. This is one of the built-in stored procedures that returns the list of all the database of the current instance. I'll hit Enter and then type Go and press Enter again. And as you can see, the 4 databases that are part of every SQL Server instance by default appears: the master, model, MSDB, and tempdb. I can also type here, select @ version, and then Go, and it gives me the current version of my SQL Server. Don't worry, we are not going to work with this console window to design our database, although many programmers prefer working with a console window without any visual editor. But if you are a beginner, you will find it less interesting. I'll exit from this environment by typing Exit. To install a separate software that has a graphical user interface to work with when designing our database systems, we can launch the SQL Server Installation Center one more time. And I'm going to click this SQL Server Management Tools. All it does is it simply launches a web browser that points you to download the latest version of SQL Server Management Studio. Go ahead and click the download link. The installation file is about 640 megabytes. Once the download is completed, just run it. This is a simple install, so just click the install button. After a few minutes, when setup is completed, just click the close button. Click the Windows Start button and navigate to Microsoft SQL Server 2019 folder. You'll see here the SQL Server Configuration Manager. I suggest that you pin this to Start menu. We'll be working with this later. Similarly, inside the Microsoft SQL Server Tools folder, right-click the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio and pin it to Start menu as well. Now, I'll run the SQL Server Configuration Manager. And inside the SQL Server Services, you'll again see the SQL Server Browser and Agent both stop. And the only service currently running is the 2019 instance of my SQL Server database engine. You can change the state of this anytime you want. If I right-click on this and choose Properties, you'll be presented an option to either stop, pause, or restart the running service. And if I click on the Services tab, you can change the start mode of this service to either automatic, disabled, or manual. I want my database engine to be always running every time my computer starts. I'll close this for the meantime, and now, let's check the software that we are going to use all throughout this course, the SQL Server Management Studio, or SSMS. Every time you open this, you'll be presented with a Connect to Server dialog window. To log into your database engine, make sure to choose the server type of Database Engine. Then, in the server name, if you don't see the name of your server here, just click this Browse for More option, and a Browse for Server dialog window will appear. You can either look for the database engine installed on your local machine or browse for any existing network servers available. Since I don't have any network servers available at this moment, I'll click on these local servers, and then Database Engine, and select the only SQL Server instance installed. Note that if you are connecting to your local computer, you can simply replace this one with the word localhost, and then / the name of your SQL Server instance, or a much simpler option, just a dot. I prefer to use my computer name. Under Authentication, you can choose to log in using Windows Authentication or SQL Server Authentication. We briefly discussed these two options earlier during the installation process. When using the Windows Authentication, you will be using the same Windows credentials you used to log in your Windows system, so there's no need to provide a separate username and password. In the SQL Server Authentication, you will be asked to enter your user account and password. Type SA under Login, and for the password, this is the same password that you specified during the installation process. Go ahead and type it, and click Connect. The area that you will be working most of the time is this Object Explorer window. I'll expand it a bit, and in here, you'll see the instance name of your SQL server together with its version number and the user login. I'll click this unplug icon to disconnect to the server. Now, I'll click this plug icon again to connect to any server that I want. I will then be presented with the same Connect to Server dialog window. This time, I'll choose Windows Authentication. No need to provide the username and password. Simply click Connect. Though the Object Explorer looks the same, but the user login is different. It is no longer SA, but my Windows account Joed. For this SQL Server instance, you can see several folders like Databases, which holds the default system databases as well as the databases that you're going to create in the future. This is the one that you saw in your SQL command in a console window earlier. You also have here Security folder, and if you click on the logins, you'll see all the available user logins that can access to this SQL Server instance. Notice this SA account that we used earlier to connect to this instance. I'll right-click on it and select Properties. Under the status page, I can click on this option button to disable this login. I'll click OK, right-click, and refresh on this logins folder. And now you'll see that this SA login has a red X mark on it, which means disabled. I'll disconnect to the server again and try to log in using the SA login account. This time, the login fails. So I'll reconnect using Windows Authentication and enable this SA login again. I only showed you the area wherein you'll be managing different user logins in the future. We'll discuss more of this in some later videos. Actually, there's not much to see initially in this visual environment. At the top, you have the default standard toolbar, and depending on what you are currently working on, additional toolbars will appear. For example, if I click on this New Query button, a query window editor appears. I can type the same code I showed you earlier in the console window. I'll type the select at version, and now notice the IntelliSense to autocomplete what I'm about to type. When this query editor window appears, the SQL editor toolbar appears as well. So I can do tasks related to this query like executing this code, or selecting from this drop-down list your target database that this query will be executed on. You can see it in the View menu, Toolbars, and as you can see, I only have two toolbars currently enabled. Most of the time, you will be doing a lot of right-clicking to the objects that appear in your Object Explorer window to do majority of the tasks that we will be doing throughout this course, like creating new database or attaching and restoring backup databases, and so on. I recommend that you explore it and familiarize yourself with this SQL Server Management Studio. Because up next, we'll start creating our first database in SQL Server 2019. Thanks for watching, and if you are new to my channel, please click the subscribe button for more programming lectures. And if you learned something of value here, please don't forget to click the like button. And once again, this is Joe Edgo, and I hope to see you in the next video lecture.